Which of the following weighs the most? And the choices: 3 times 10 to the 24th atoms of He, 3 times 10 to the 23rd atoms of Ar, and 6 times 10 to the 24th molecules of H2. And the answer is E. All three choices have equal weights. A straightforward approach to answering this question would simply be to find the mass of each choice and then to see that they are in fact all equal. And when you look at these choices, you can see that they each involve many numbers of particles. But in chemistry, let's remember that we count by the mole, and 1 mole is 6 times 10 to the 24th. So what we'll want to do is to figure out how many moles each of these choices are, and that will help us in figuring out how heavy they each are. So we'll start with helium. When you look up helium on the periodic table, its atomic number is 2. It's the second element on the periodic table, and its atomic mass is 4. And that tells us that 1 mole of helium is 4 grams. So 1 mole of helium is 6 times 10 to the 23rd atoms of helium, and that's the same thing as 4 grams. So how many moles of helium do we have? Well, if you look at this number, you should be able to work out that we have 5 moles of helium. Because think about 1 mole of helium. If you multiply this number by 10 moles of helium would be 6 times 10 to the 24th. But 5 times that 1 mole would be 3 times 10 to the 24th. It would be 1/2 of 6 times 10 to the 24th. And that's what we have. We have 5 moles of helium. Another way to get that would be a straightforward calculation. You take this number and you divide it by 6 times 10 to the 23rd, and that will give you 5. So when you do this calculation on paper, you know that 4 grams of helium is the same thing as this many atoms, and you can use this to build a conversion factor. And then when you start with the number of atoms in the choice, 3 times 10 to the 24th, multiplying it by the conversion factor, the atoms cancels, the calculation, this number divided by that number gives you 5, and you're left with 5 times 4, or 20 grams. So the first choice is 20 grams. Let's move to the argon. In the argon, we have 1/2 of a mole, because remember, 1 mole is 6 times 10 to the 23rd, and we have 3 times 10 to the 23rd. So we have 1/2 of a mole. So looking up argon on the periodic table, it's element 18 and atomic mass 40. And that tells us that 1 mole of argon is 40 grams. And that's the same thing as 6 times 10 to the 23rd atoms of argon. And we have 1/2 of that many atoms, and so we should have 1/2 of that mass. And if you want to see the calculation in a nice format, you take your number of atoms in the choice, 3 times 10 to the 23rd, multiplying it by this conversion factor. That gets rid of the atoms. The 10 to the 23rd cancels the 10 to the 23rd. And then you have 3 over 6, which is 1/2 times 40 gives you 20 grams again. So the second choice is also 20 grams. It's up to the last one. Let's see. So this is the H2. And here we have 6 times 10 to the 24th molecules of H2. And you should see that that is 10 moles of H2, because 1 mole is 6 times 10 to the 23rd, and this is 10 times that. So we have 10 moles of H2. So looking up hydrogen on the periodic table, it's the first element and atomic mass 1. And since we're talking about H2, we have to multiply this number by 2. And so 1 mole of H2 is 2 grams. And we have 10 moles of H2. So that would be 10 times 2 grams, or 20 grams. And again, to see the calculation, you start with your number of molecules in the choice, and then using this to build the conversion factor, The molecules cancels the molecules. The 6 cancels the 6. And 10 to the 24th over 10 to the 23rd gives you 10. And so you're left with 10 times 2, which is 20. And so all three choices weigh 20 grams. And the answer is E.